For more than 60 years since India's independence, the country has faced grave security challenges, from wars with China and Pakistan to dealing with brutal forms of terrorism. Someone who has directly handled the responsibility of managing India's security has been former External Affairs Minister Jaswant Singh. In his new book, India at Risk, Mr. Singh writes about the enormous challenges that India has faced, including some of his very own, such as the hijacking of IC-814 to Kandahar, the Kargil War and Operation Parakram against Pakistan. Here are some key extracts. Well, those were just some snippets from that book, and it is a recommended read because it gives you a glimpse of the last 65 years of India's history and the grave security challenges that India has faced. Mr. Jaswant Singh joins us here in the studio tonight. So it's wonderful to have you on the program. I want to first ask you an overall question. You've described the wars that India has fought, the battles, but when you look at what India has already gone through and what we face today in terms of security challenges, are we living in more grave times today?
Are you getting more? What?
Are these more grave times for us in terms of security challenges?
I'm sorry, I couldn't follow that question.
We fought wars.
Yeah.
Maybe a conventional war will never happen again, the way it has in the past. But are the challenges we face greater today with security?
I'm afraid they are. They are greater challenges, more complex, because the world is more complex. And we are all older. India, the country, is older. And the most distressing part of it is that whether our thinking about security issues has kept pace with the challenges that face the country today. There is, after all, what you mentioned yourself, a new form of internal challenge that has surfaced. Vijayram Ramesh just the other day quite rightly called it is the Maoist is, after all, another variety of terrorism, and it takes about 127 districts in its hand. This is one challenge, the challenge of managing the country's economy. I start the book with some quotes that every country has to have an army. Are our armed forces exactly what we would like them to be, with equipment, morale, manpower? So of course there are many more complex challenges today, because even from the point of view of 47 to the various periods that we've been through, these are periods of change, and change demands thinking and alteration of viewpoints.
Let me look at some of the specifics now in the book. And obviously, when one talks about you and the security challenges you faced, Kandahar comes to mind straight away. And you said in the book that it was the most demanding and emotionally the most draining period of your life. I want to tell you that I was a young reporter covering this story, and I remember when Mr. Vajpayee met the relatives of those who were on board, you were there with him. I remember seeing that emotional pain on your face. You broke down as you were speaking to the relatives. Can you describe to us what you went through internally at that time, which you've explained in quite some detail as well in the book?
Because it's never an easy decision to take. I was torn between accepting the demands of the terrorists or rejecting them, until the national mood so demonstrated itself. I don't want to remind you of that, but people rolling on the racecourse road in front of the Prime Minister's house, on the road, beating their chests and saying, do what you can, we don't care whom you give, we want our relatives back. it places any government, the government then or any government, in a most impossible situation. I earlier was not of the view that we should concede anything to the terrorist until I began to see and appreciate and understand better the national mood. The national mood was not in consonance with such a. And I realized, not as an afterthought, but even while meeting this challenge, that it's never in governments, it is never a straight choice between a black and a white. The decision that will have to be made is between bad and bad, bad and less bad. And the thinking was, what is less bad? Is it less bad to let 166 innocent citizens who have boarded an Indian airline in the faith, in belief that it will take us to our destination? Or is it bad to release the terrorists or let the hostages die? I'll cite you an instance. After they had been released, I traveled back with them to Delhi. And I traveled back standing and meeting as many of them as I could. Two particularly. A woman who had been confined in that for past 1 week, just that tube of an aeroplane. 166, one toilet. It is Kandahar in the pre-Christmas week, freezing cold. There is no heating in the aircraft. There is no cleaning. It was, you don't have to visit hell, that was hell. This woman came up to me and said, why did you not come earlier? She was beating me on my chest, she was hysterical, understandably. The other woman came and said, what has happened to my children? They were traveling by train from Dehradun. I was to meet them at the railway station. I have no answers to these questions.
You wouldn't have done it any other way?
I wouldn't have done it in any other fashion. I realized then. You have to, no government has a right to let 166 innocent people die.
You know, Mr. Singh, there's been so much controversy about what happened at that time with the release of the terrorists, and one of them also was about whether the then Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Advani, knew about this decision. He claimed he didn't. And you famously actually did say, when you were expelled from the BJP a few years ago, you said, yes, he was very much part of the decision. In the book, though, you're silent on that, on what led the cabinet to take this call at the end of the day. Why didn't you dwell on that more?
But all decisions in a government like this, I announced, I told the cabinet, I am going to Kandahar. Why was I going to Kandahar? Because the official officers who were there had negotiated the release, but they were unsure in reality whether there would or would not be any glitches at the last minute. And if there were glitches, who was to take a decision on the spot? And there was a glitch. The agreement was that first the hostages would be released, and we had a relief aircraft waiting, and only then the terrorists would be released. At the last minute, we have reached, the terrorists are still in the aircraft, they changed it.
But the entire cabinet knew, is my point. As you said earlier as well, Mr. Advani was very much in know of this decision. I'm asking why you didn't dwell on that in the book, because it was a very important chapter in our history.
You said, no, I don't hesitate to say. Two of the cabinet colleagues, Mr. Arun Shourie and Mr. Advani, were not of the view that the hostages should be released.
They didn't agree with it?
But they didn't.
Till the very end?
What?
Till the very end?
No. Once they realized that the Prime Minister was also of the view that they should be released, then of course they let their objections die. Mr. Advani was Home Minister. Without his consent, these terrorists who were in various prisons, they couldn't have been released. He agreed because the Prime Minister's views were, we have to release them.